All right, so we are live. Hi, everybody. It's Catie Harris, owner and CEO of NursePreneurs. And Kimball, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yes. Hi, everyone. I am Kimball Bradley, and I am the coach for the IV hydration course inside of NursePreneurs. I also own Drip Chattanooga and Elite Concierge Nurses.
And today we have Dr. Chris Seitz on with us from Guardian Medical Direction. So welcome.
Hi, yeah, I'm Dr. Christopher Seitz. I'm the CEO of Guardian Medical Direction and the Chief Medical Officer of Guardian Medical Direction. I'm really happy to be here. I really appreciate you guys hosting this and letting me join in for a little while.
Awesome. All right. So I know you have, so what we're going to be doing today is talking about medical directors and setting expectations, roles, and that kind of stuff. So please ask questions, post them in the thread, and we will answer them as they come up. But Dr. Seitz, I know you have a PowerPoint, so if you want to share that, we can go over a few slides and then get to some Q&A.
Yeah, perfect. So I really want this to be more of a Q&A if we can. I want to be able to answer your guys' questions as we go forward here. I'll start by saying there is a lot of confusion and a lot of navigating when it comes to the medical director role and how that looks. So I'm actually going to be interrupted by kindergartners coming home from their first day of school. So hold on one second. I'm going to shut my door. I apologize.
That's too cute.
Okay, didn't time that very well, but that's okay. But anyway, yeah, so I do have a couple slides. I don't, like I said, my goal today is not to pitch you on Guardian Medical Direction. Obviously, we are here for you. If you need a medical director, if you need a physician collaborator, please reach out to us. Like I said, we'd love to talk to you about what we can do for you. But more today, I wanted to spend just a couple minutes talking about the medical director role as a whole, okay? And kind of what you can expect, what you should look for, things that we do as medical directors and things that we don't do. So really quick, I'm going to share my screen here. We'll pull this up. And you guys let me know if you can see it here. Is that coming up on there?
Yeah, we can see it.
Perfect. Awesome. So the first thing I like to talk about when I talk about like medical directors and collaborators and things like that is really this new collaborative practice model that we need to and are starting to move to in healthcare in general. We see a lot of terms thrown out there when it comes to medical directors. We see medical director, we see collaborative physician, we see supervising physician, and it can get really confusing and kind of convoluted as to what those terms mean. Sometimes people use them interchangeably, which makes it more confusing. But really what it boils down to is what type of medical oversight is required or needed or wanted for your business or for your license. So really when we talk to the difference between like a medical director versus a collaborative physician, we're looking at, who has autonomy and how do we protect that autonomy? In the age of COVID, in the age of telemedicine, as things have, integrative healthcare where we're needing to push off more responsibility to nurse practitioners, to nurses, to PAs, even to paramedics and nursing assistants. I mean, really, we really as a whole in the healthcare system need to all come together to serve the patient in multiple entities. The days of the doctor being the only one or the one solely responsible for the patient are kind of over. And we need to move to this more collaborative practice model for the benefit of our patients and for the benefit of our system. So really when we talk about like a medical director versus a physician collaborator or a supervising physician, we're looking at who has what autonomy, who is ultimately the responsible party, and what level of oversight are we looking at. So a medical director, and like for you guys who are RNs and starting an IV hydration business, really what you're looking for is a medical director. You have autonomy to work within your scope of practice. And what you want is for that medical director role to protect that autonomy. However, the level of oversight is more than a collaborative physician. The level of oversight when it comes to a medical director, for instance, like an RN starting an IV hydration business, is that ultimately the physician is kind of responsible for the patient. Now, there's some ways that we can mitigate that risk and protect your autonomy as the nurse who's actually providing the services and the treatments. But really what it comes down to from a liability standpoint is that the medical director is going to have some of that liability because they're providing your oversight. You are still the responsible party though, right? You are the one who's actually treating the patient, putting your hands on the patient. You are responsible for that patient. The medical director then becomes responsible for overseeing that. And the way we do that, and we'll kind of get into it, is through protocols and procedures and standing orders and things like that. On the collaborative side, now we're talking more about like nurse practitioners or PAs, and even those two you can't really put together because nurse practitioners have a lot more autonomy than physician's assistants do. But now the level of oversight is more of this kind of coming together and providing resources and guidance, not so much complete oversight over the practice. And again, like I say all this, and then you'll go out and ask 5 other people and they'll give you a different definition, because again, it's a changing, moving target right now. The medical director role and the physician collaborative role is really changing quickly in this post-COVID era where, again, we need a level of responsibility and oversight, but we also need, practitioners like yourselves to have more autonomy, to be able to go out and do more and to serve patients better. So how do you find the right, not perfect fit? And I throw this in here as the title slide is like not perfect, because I'll tell you right now, if you go and try to find a doctor who practices medicine exactly like you do, agrees completely with the way you interpret laws and regulations and compliance, who's available, it's not going to happen, right? So we need to almost temper expectations a little bit. You want to find the right fit, but it's not necessarily going to be perfect. There's a couple options out there right now for you. One, you can ask a colleague. The pros to that is that you know them, right? You know them, you're familiar with their practice patterns most likely. Cons, you know them, right? So it's really hard to contract a physician colleague that you work with maybe outside of your business, or who you have, or maybe who's a friend, and now to have this kind of more business-like relationship. So that can get a little messy and be difficult. Another thing you can do is you can put out an ad. I see a lot of nurses put out Indeed ads, looking for a medical director. Some of the pros here is that like you probably will get a lot of options. There are a lot of physicians out there who are looking for these types of opportunities. The cons there is the due diligence piece. Who's making sure they're insured correctly? Who's making sure that who's doing a background on their license? Who's making sure that they are following things correctly? Do they have an attorney that they work with? So that due diligence piece now becomes your responsibility, which can be very difficult. And then the other option is you can use a service. So you can use a service like Guardian Medical Direction, other ones out there, collaborating doctors, Doctors for Providers. Some of the pros there is that, we end up taking on a lot of the legal and due diligence stuff, right? So we take on giving you those recommendations, showing you how to be compliant based on our legal teams and things like that. We do the due diligence on the physician, make sure that their license is in good standing, make sure that they are being educated themselves as laws and compliance things change. But some of the cons there is that it might not be the perfect fit, right? I mean, like we have access to a lot of doctors. Finding you that one perfect fit is probably not going to happen if we're being realistic, right? But can we find you the right fit? Usually we can, right? One of the other benefits sometimes of using a service is that I know like with medical direction, Guardian Medical Direction, if it's really not a good fit at all, you just let us know and we switch you over, because we do have access and educate our providers that way. So that's the first step, is you got to find one of these physicians. There's a couple different options out there for you right now. Then we talk a little bit about the medical director role. I want to talk about what it is briefly, and then I want to talk about what it's not for a little bit longer, because I think expectations out there need to be tempered a little bit. So your medical director serves one purpose, and that is to oversee your medical practice, right? They're hopefully helping you draft protocols, reviewing your protocols, making sure that they, from a medical standpoint, from a healthcare standpoint, are going to serve the patient best, that they meet standards of care. They're going to be available to you to answer medical related questions, right? Like, hey, what's the second line treatment for this? What do you like to use? Hey, I saw a new research article. Have you looked at that? What are your thoughts? Again, medical related questions. They're there to do chart review, right? They're there to make sure that like they're going over your charts periodically to say, yeah, this looks like you're charting well, or hey, I see some areas that we can improve. And then of course, they're going to be there to help verify that you have oversight, right? They're going to sign those pharmacy forms and those supplier forms to say, yeah, I am the doctor and I am overseeing that stuff. That's what they do. Let's talk about what they don't do. And we see a lot of confusion in this. I see even with some of our current clients where they come to us and they expect us as an organization or the physician themselves to also know and understand all the compliance and legal stuff. That's not what we do as physicians. I'll tell you right now, there's a reason, even with Guardian Medical Direction, that I have a full legal team. I'm not an attorney. I don't know that stuff. We didn't learn it in medical school, and it's really difficult. You can ask 5 different attorneys about medical compliance, especially right now with things changing, and they're all going to give you a little bit of a different answer. And that's okay. All right, that's okay. I think sometimes we get scared about the gray, And really the gray from a business standpoint can be an opportunity as long as we're working with our medical doctor to say, hey, are you comfortable with this from a medical standpoint? Are you comfortable with this from a treatment standpoint? And if we're always working to try to work together and trying to do what's best for the patient, I think we're going to be okay, right? I mean, like I said, even where we have had issues where regulatory bodies like a board of nursing have come in and said, hey, show us these things, show us that. Even if, and we haven't had this yet, but even if we were to fall short a little bit, typically, like I said, I talk to the board of nursing in multiple states every day. And really what it is, they want to say that you're going to collaborate with them as well, right? If you're doing something that they say, you know what, that's not really what we intended. Can we shift over and do it this way? If you say, yeah, absolutely. And you and your medical director work with them to make things right for them, that's great, right? I think a lot of times we get really scared as doctors and nurses that, we're going to lose our license. And really, you know what, like, there's always risk, right? We can mitigate a lot of risk, and we can do that by coming together as a team and really saying, okay, what's best for the patient, and let's do our best. And if we get more information, adjust accordingly. So your medical director is not going to be your compliance and legal side, right? I know we in collaborating docs and doctors for providers probably provide some of that guidance from a legal standpoint. I know we do quite a bit, but again, it really is your business. So the liability from a compliance standpoint really will come onto you to figure out, and the doctor will work with you, hopefully, to do those things, but that's not their role. They're also not a business coach, and they're not a business partner. And like I said, that's why we partner with groups like NursePreneurs, because there is such a need for that. It's hard starting a business. That's another thing we didn't learn in medical school, and you probably didn't learn in nursing school, is how to start a business, how to run a business, how to do all that. That's why we have coaches like Kimball and Catie out here who's really providing these types of resources for us. The medical director is not that, right? If you're relying on your medical director for things like compliance and legal and business coaching and to be a partner in your business, you're probably looking at the wrong person for that type of thing. So there's one quick thing I like to add in here too, is this direct versus indirect patient care model. So once you've got a doctor, once the expectations have been set about, kind of what their role is and what it's not, then a big part of it is communicating with your doctor. How do we communicate with our doctor effectively? And really, I like to say, try to work in an indirect patient care fashion. If you start calling your physician on a regular basis and asking specific patient care questions, hey, can you look at this chart? Can you ask me about this patient? It's going to become very difficult for the physician to continue to feel confident in moving forward. Not because they're going to question your skills at all, but because in their mind, they're going to see their liability increasing. We have sometimes nurses who approach us and say, hey, I'm starting this business. I'm going to do these services. I just want to make sure that I'm not liable. The doctor is. It's like, well, no, unfortunately, that's not how business works, right? If you're treating the patient, you are liable. Now, of course, is the doctor going to get named in a suit? Absolutely. My physicians ask me sometimes, like, well, am I protected, to not get named in a lawsuit? And I always say, listen, buddy, like you went into the wrong field if you were trying to figure out how to never get named in a lawsuit. It just is what it is, right? So working in a more indirect patient care way really puts a lot of confidence into the medical director that you're taking responsibility for your patients, right? We have protocols, we have procedures, we have standing orders, but you're still going to have questions, right? So again, the question becomes, who is the decision maker at the time of the visit? And really, as a business owner and as the person providing care, it should be you. And that protects your autonomy. That protects really your argument that you should own this business and you should have the profits and things like that. But there's a way we can go about that. So I like to coach a little bit on this when I give these presentations, because I think it can be a big help as you communicate with your medical director. So an example is that this is a question we had come in through one of our clients, is that I've got a patient on 150 milligrams of Zoloft, 150 of Wellbutrin, Respiridol. The patient has ADHD, PTSD, anxiety, depression, reports doing well with everything from mood, depression, anxiety on their current regimen, except she believes her Respiridol made her more agitated, didn't think it was working. I was thinking about adding Strattera and getting rid of the Respiridol, just worried about that drug combination. Let me know if you think something else would be better. I took Adderall, and she took Adderall in the past, but it does not seem to go well with her other meds. So this doctor reached out to us at Guardian Medical Direction and said, hey, I don't know if I feel comfortable answering this question. This is a very patient-specific question. If I answer this, it makes me feel that I'm very much involved in this specific patient's care, and then I start to worry. So what we did is we kind of reached out to this client and said, hey, listen, this question can be answered in a very indirect patient care way. Really what her question was is, hey, with the drug combination of Wellbutrin and Zoloft, if I add Strattera, is there anything I need to be worried about? And basically that's how you word that question, right? So she took that question, reworded it. The physician felt much more comfortable now answering a medical question that is still going to help her serve that patient, but not make that physician feel like they're absolutely engaged in that direct patient care type of model. So that's just, like I said, I like to throw this in here because this is, again, I think a way we need to move to in the future is this more indirect patient care model while we're talking with medical directors and things like that. So that, again, we can protect your autonomy and also protect the physician's and yours liability moving forward. Finally, this is one of the last slides here, but managing expectations. So you really, no matter who you're working with, whether it's an agency like ours, or if it's a direct, medical director you found on Indeed, you really need to manage the expectations of what is going to be their level of involvement, what is going to be their level of availability, and then what's going to be the pay structure. And I say this because I think there are some expectations out there. For the most part, it seems straightforward, right? It seems straightforward. Like, the doctor really just has to sign a few charts, be available to me when I have questions. It shouldn't cost that much money. And to that argument, yeah, I mean, in some instances, you're absolutely correct. However, we see this happen a lot of times where on the one end, they feel, hey, you know what? This is this should be a low cost type of thing. I don't want to have to put a lot of money into this. I don't really need a lot of oversight, just this thing. But you have to remember, too, that has to then reflect the level of involvement and availability you expect of your physician. If you want your physician to answer the phone anytime you call, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, that's a lot to ask, right? Physicians have their own practices. Most physicians make between $100, $200 an hour. Telemedicine, they get paid anywhere from $20 to $35 per 15-minute visit. So their time is valuable. So again, if you really have to think about and manage the expectations for the physician and yourself about what type of availability, how quickly are they going to respond, how much access are you going to have to them? And then the level of involvement. Do you expect them to do good faith exams on every single one of your patients or sign charts on every single one of them, or just do some chart review once a month? Again, that's a different level of involvement. Most doctors, like I said, if you look at like Quest Diagnostics, LabCorp, we get paid about $10 to $15 per chart we throw our signature on. That can add up if you're seeing 30, 40, 50 patients. And we do think that way because we recognize how we get compensated in other areas. And then basing your pay structure based on that. One moment I'll take to just pause and say, don't underestimate yourself as a business owner. And what I mean by that is that there are a lot of physicians out there, and I think they mean well, but they'll say, hey, listen, you know what? Like, I'm not going to charge you anything. Just give me a percentage of the business. Don't sell yourself short, right? Don't give up equity in a business that you could grow to this big thing. And you probably will, right? I mean, I think that you guys are well positioned, especially if you're working with people like Kimball and Catie, to really grow very successful businesses. And I apologize if you hear screaming in the background. But again, like I said, don't sell yourself short. Invest in it up front, right? The medical director should be, in my opinion, a set fee. And if the set fee in the beginning is hard to swallow because you're not up and running yet, just remember that you're going to be up and running. And you don't want to sacrifice profits later on to get a quick fix right now, right? Really invest in yourself and invest in your business in this way. I see this happen a lot where people say, hey, my medical director is only charging me a couple $100 a month until I scale, and then it's going to go up. Well, that's where you, like I said, when it goes up, you've done that work. The doctor didn't do that work. Let's be honest, right? You built that business. You built that success. You should have all of that in the end. So just something to think about as you go out there and do that. So again, this is just a very brief, quick overview just to share with you some of the kind of big things we see in the medical direction space. Again, if you need a medical director, we're more than happy to work with you. And you can talk with one of our account managers about what that looks like. But I'd like to turn it over already quickly to just questions. I said, I know you guys probably have a ton of questions when it comes to this. You've heard lots of things. You've seen lots of things. Maybe it's time to just dive down and try to answer your questions, if that sounds good to you guys.
Yeah, I love it. So definitely ask questions. Go ahead and put them in the thread. We'll be able to see them. And yeah, I love that last part that you said, because we do a couple of times is, I've had nurses, two things in particular, and they're both relevant. They'll, one, give away equity way too early, or two, they want to partner with 2 or 3 of their friends. And I'm like, no.
Don't do it.
Exactly, yeah.
Don't do it. Yeah.
And the thing is, too, one thing that you have to remember is that when you bring a medical director on, and again, like I said, obviously I feel that doing it a certain way is the best way. I own a business that does it, right? One of the benefits, whether you use our service or a different service, of using a service versus going out and finding one medical director that people sometimes overlook is that what if that doctor decides he doesn't want to do it anymore?
Right.
What if he decides, you know what, I'm retiring, or she says, you know what, it's just not a good fit for me, or hey, I want more money, and you're like, no, you don't deserve more money. Well, what do you do in the interim? Because now you've got to scramble to find a new doctor, and you got to close your doors, and that's good. You don't want to ever have to do that, right? So I know, like I said, you know, I know we do, and I'm sure some of the other service providers out there for medical direction basically say, hey, listen, we will replace your doctor immediately so that you can keep your doors open. We want your business to thrive with the proper medical oversight to do so. So just another thing to think about as you go out there and are looking for that type of oversight.
I agree with you totally on that. And I appreciate you going over what the medical director's responsibilities are, because I get a lot of questions like, well, what will the doctor tell me about compliance is a big one. You know, it's a huge one. They want to know, they want me to play lawyer. They want the doctor to play lawyer. They want everyone to play a lawyer. And so I've told many students, you know, we're not lawyers. So you really have to talk to your lawyer about that. And you're right, with the way things are changing now, you absolutely have to have a lawyer to set up your contracts and everything. So I appreciate you going over that. Another big question I have, I'm not sure if anyone's putting questions in the group, but how do they approach the doctors? I mean, I think as nurses, some of us have the mentality that we are working for them. And I know I know doctors can't work for nurses, but it's a contractual agreement. It's what it is. And it is our business. So I think we have to start thinking like business owners instead of hospital workers.
Absolutely.
I think that's a huge disconnect between nurses that are just getting started and don't have that business background and not used to being able to work with doctors instead of working, you know, directly under them, or there's just some communication breakdown there.
Yeah. I think the best way when you're approaching a physician is just being very clear on what your needs, expectations, and current structure is. So, I mean, if you come to me and say, hey, Dr. Seitz, you know, I was wondering if you might be interested in providing medical oversight for my business. Here's what that means. Here's what I will be doing. Here's what I would need you to do. Here is what I have in place. Like, here is the attorney that I have in place. Here is the people, like having those things in place. You know, it's difficult because it's always, what's the timing, right? Do I get the medical director first? Do I get the attorney first? And you kind of have to almost do it all in the same time period, because it does like the attorney's going to ask you for the doctor's information. The doctor's going to ask you. So again, and again, this is what my vision is really for Guardian Medical Direction in the future. Really what we're trying to build is a true collaborative practice, not just with a doctor and a nurse, but we bring in the attorneys. We talk to the boards of nursing. We're already lobbying in Georgia to get the mile radius thing removed because it doesn't make sense anymore. I mean, like these kinds of things that, like, as a community, we have to come together. And that, I will say, means that we all need to have a lot of patience. And that's something that I think that, like, we don't have a lot of in healthcare sometimes. A lot of us are burned out. A lot of us are frustrated. Starting a business is going to quadruple your stress. But take a breath and realize, you know, we do get people who get frustrated very often, like, this isn't working, or I'm getting multiple things. People are saying all this different stuff. That's okay, right? Let's come together, right? Let's sit down together. And everybody is going to have different opinions. Where can we meet halfway? Because we do see this happen sometimes where nurses will come and say, I talked to my attorney. They said the law is this. And then the doctor says, actually, my attorney's saying that the law is this. And then what happens is that we have this butting of heads, as opposed to, well, let's talk. Let's figure out some common middle ground. How can we? And we've even done this with law firms who have come to us and said, hey, we want the doctor to sign this. And we're looking at it going, I don't know. Our legal team doesn't think this is a good idea. The doctor doesn't feel comfortable. And usually they'll have a conversation with us. Well, why is that? They talk, and then we'll come to some kind of mutual ground. That does take time. And people want things to happen right away. But again, I think if we, again, truly approach this from a collaborative standpoint and have patience and work together and realize that there is a lot of gray. I always tease it. If you go to the board of nursing, they'll tell you to talk to an attorney who will tell you to talk to the board of medicine, who will tell you to talk to the board of nursing. You'll never start your business, because it's just the reality of it. And I think there's two ways we can look at that. We can look at that with frustration and say, this is impossible. Or we can look at that as, like, clearly there's an opportunity. Right. Clearly, there's an opportunity because there is so much gray for us to work this out. You know, one of our goals, too, is that if we can create a structure that works well for everyone and ultimately the patient, maybe the regulators don't have to come in and tell us what we can or can't do or how we should do it, because we're just doing it well. So.
Yes, absolutely. That's a fantastic point. I agree.
Yep, absolutely. And I do have a couple of questions in here. And Jenna is asking, she's in Pennsylvania and her physician is in Virginia, and wants to know if he can work with her, and they have to physically be in that state. So do you want to talk about multi-state licenses?
Sure, sure. So again, a gray area. It's very difficult right now. And even when we talk to the boards in the different states, we get mixed things even from the same people, right? So the question is, and this question comes up a lot, does the doctor have to be in my state? The answer is no, unless the board says otherwise. And I say that because, again, what's happened now is that physicians can have multi-state licenses, and so can nurses, right? So if I can have multi-state licenses, which means I can practice medicine in multi-states, I also can't live in multiple states, unfortunately, right? Like I always say, the ideal physician candidate when I talk to my recruitment team is someone who has a license in all 50 states and lives in all 50 states, right? Because there's no, that's really, so there's a lot of confusion around that, like what is allowed, what's not allowed. And it really kind of is a case-by-case basis. We've had no real issues with having doctors work with and for, groups that are in different states as long as they're licensed there. Now, there are some states, though, that really crack down on, no, the doctor has to be in state. When we reach out to those, and Georgia is an example. Pennsylvania, I haven't run into that. In Georgia, we run into it all the time. Collaborative agreements with nurses, they say, no, the doctors have to be in state. But then we pose the question back, well, hang on, if the nurse practitioner, and I'll use nurse practitioners as the example here because this is the example that I have from Georgia. If the nurse practitioner doesn't live in Georgia because she's doing telemedicine or whatever, and this is a telemedicine example, why would the doctor have to? And if we're going to do like a mile radius, is it a mile radius from the patient, or is it a mile radius from the nurse, or is it a mile? And they can't answer these questions. So sometimes what we have to look at is what are the regulations and requirements and what's being enforced. And I don't mean that as a way to like sneak around and like make things work for us. But at the same time, we do have to a little bit, kind of ebb and flow where we, there's risk, right? There's always risk in business. So, for instance, in Pennsylvania, we've had no problems having off-site medical directors who live in other states work with our clients. Now, if the board came to us and said, hey, you know what, we actually want somebody more local, well, then we would pivot, right? And I think that's where we have to be able to like recognize that, we're going to do our best with what we have. The big question with states like that too is that very much limits access to healthcare, right? So in Missouri, they have a mile radius requirement. It's like 40 miles or 75 miles from the doctor. But they lift it if they're in rural Missouri. And if you look at a map of Missouri's like urban rural, there's like 12 different interpretations because it's whoever took the census. But what it boils down to is that if you don't live in St. Louis, you're in rural Missouri. It's kind of like if you look at these things. So again, it's really, you kind of have to take it state by state. So to answer the question directly, I think that's perfectly fine. We do that all the time. That being said, things change, things come to our attention. We have to be able to, as business owners and healthcare workers, shift and move and pivot as needed in order to stay in compliance and that sort of thing.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to clarify one thing on that because, Jenna, I just want you to know that your physician, if he's in Virginia, he or she would have to have a license in PA in order to work with you. So they
absolutely have to have a license.
Yeah, so they have to. So that's just a clarifying point there. Yeah. And then to your point about different states having different rules, somebody wrote Ohio, the physician has to be physically present. And I'm not sure about that one, but I know that they did make some changes in the last year in Ohio, and it's a little bit more restrictive.
It is a little more restricted. They actually don't have to be on site, depending on what you're doing, because they can delegate through certain protocols. So a lot of times, like I said, just with any like legal thing, there's typically some type of workaround if you have the right procedures and policies and things in place. So again, it's kind of a case by case. But people who think that there's these hard and fast rules, I would just warn you against that as well. Like I said, because it'll change tomorrow. In one sense, Ohio's a good example because again, they've increased restrictions on some things that they're not actually regulating though. Like they're not looking, like when we do get site audits and stuff like that, they're not asking those questions. And then on the other hand, they're pushing for autonomy of NPs in the near future here. So it's like, how do you do both? Right. And it's kind of more of, I think there's there's workarounds that are not necessarily illegal workarounds. It's just like with your taxes, right? Like you tax write off a kid because you can. It's not that you're not trying to work around not paying taxes. It's just, do we have the right legal paperwork in place? And there's two components, right? There's the healthcare side and there's the legal. And unfortunately, they don't talk. So we kind of have to, I think, as healthcare professionals and business owners, straddle that line of, you know, what's good for healthcare and the patient and what works for my business and how do I stay compliant. So.
Yeah, and I appreciate the conversation too. One of your slides where you talked about the compliance, legal, business coaching, and business partners, because you're right that the compliance and legal, I mean, you guys didn't study it in medical school, just like we didn't study it in nursing school. And I think the kind of hardship there is that nobody wants to pay the legal fees. And I get that. They suck. They really suck. They're expensive. But, you know, you have to have, especially in your business, everybody's going to be somewhat segmented. So the medical director is doing this. The lawyer is going to be doing the legal stuff. You know, you need a business coach to help you run the business, and you can't put all of your eggs in one person and expect that person to be everything for the business. So it is definitely something to consider. And like you said, who do you go to, you know, first, the medical director or the lawyer? And like you said, I definitely think it's something that you have to do simultaneously, because going down that legal route, I mean, you might come across lawyers that say you can't do this, and then lawyers that say you can do this. And
that's another good point, because just like we're not trained to do legal work, they're not trained to do healthcare work. There are some really great attorneys out there that we work with, and a few different firms who really have taken the time to learn the healthcare side of it as well and can advise that way. And I think too, finding an attorney who's willing to learn and listen and like really take it, like that's important, because the attorney, the example is that like when someone comes in with chest pain to the emergency, I'm ER board certified. So when someone comes into the emergency department with chest pain, I know what to do, right? I do these 5 things, right? Every single time, for the most part. Attorneys operate the same way in a legalized matter. When someone comes and says, I want to start a business, they say, okay, here's the regulations. Here's how I interpret them. Here's what we're going to do. But then the discussion comes around like, well, I don't know if I kind of disagree with that interpretation. And finding attorneys who are willing to say, oh yeah, I see what you're saying, and kind of work with you on that, I think is really important, because it's easy for an attorney to read off the regulations. It's another thing for them to work for and with you on starting a business and figuring out how to, I always say, like, we don't really ask our attorneys, can we do this? We ask our attorneys, how can we do this, right? And there's a difference between those two questions, because there's always a way. There's always a way to own your business. There's always a way to keep 100% profits. Now it may take 8 extra forms and documents that you got to fill out, but hey, there's a way. So, and that's really, like, a good attorney knows that and will do that, because that's what their job is. So.
Okay, Jenna's also asking, can you have multiple medical directors?
I guess legally, yes. I would recommend against it for a couple of reasons. One is that, and this is something that I didn't get to touch on, but I'll use this as the opportunity. When you contract with a medical director to provide medical oversight, you're asking them to give you medical oversight. If you don't like what they said, too bad. Like, in some instances, like, you've asked them to give you that oversight. We've had clients do this where they said, hey, I want, I'm in New Jersey and I want a EMT to be able to drive their car around and give IVs. And we're like, oh, no, you can't do that. And they're like, well, we want to cancel our contract and a full refund. It's like, well, wait a second. Like, you can't do this. We're telling you this is not just because you disagree. So having multiple medical directors is difficult that way, because what you're going to end up doing is you're going to pick and choose which medical director is saying what and what. And now you're really not showing good due diligence or compliance from like a medical oversight standpoint. You're in some ways using that to practice medicine how you want to practice medicine. And unfortunately, like I said, you have a scope of practice and it's limited based on your scope. I mean, like, mine is limited as a physician even. I mean, there are certain things we can and can't do. So just be careful that you're not just trying to find the loopholes to do what you want to do. In the long run, that'll end up getting you in more trouble than just sticking with what is working and what the medical director agrees with and what makes money, and do it well,
And I would just ask Jenna to clarify, do you mean multiple medical directors in multiple different states, or multiple medical directors in the same state? Because I absolutely agree with what Chris is saying about not having, you don't want too many cooks in the pot, or too many hands in the pot or whatever. But, and yeah, there's some things that you might be upset that your medical director doesn't want to do, but that's where the partnership comes in, and you
part of it.
Yeah.
That's part
and again,
of
and
it.
that's why it's important to find a medical director who, and that's one stance that we take at Guardian Medical Direction is that, hey, we want your business to succeed. Our head of compliance and legal is a nurse. She's a nurse and a malpractice attorney. So it's like best of both worlds. So like she's looking out for you. We also are physician owned. So we're watching out for the physician and really trying to, so when we take a hard stance on something, we're doing it to protect you. We're not doing it because we just don't want to let you do it, right? We want, and we will be more lenient and try to find those, I hate to call them loopholes, but like we will try to find those routes that we can take to help you get things done in business that need to get done. But again, like I said, if your medical director takes a stance on something, unfortunately, that's the stance that's been taken, you know what I mean? So that kind of has to be honored in that way as part of the agreement.
Yeah, I agree. And then the other thing that you said, and this is why, we really liked going with the services like Guardian Medical Direction, because before we did it, like when Kimball first started, and Kimball, you can tell this story, but I mean, she worked with a colleague who, was working for free for her, and that didn't quite work out.
Sure. Yeah.
No, it did not. I ended up having to get another medical director after a little while. I thought free was good, but free is not always the best route.
And I will throw that in there too. Like, you really do get what you pay for. I mean, like in Guardian Medical Direction, we have a very affordable plan for IV hydration. That doesn't mean that you can just call your doctor 24/7, unfortunately. Sorry, and I'm not going to pretend that it does, right? I mean, like, they're very available. We usually try to give them with like 48 hours. And one of the benefits too for us, now, if it's an urgent call, they can call through our platform and get a hold of them. We recognize that. But, for basic questions, getting paperwork done, like you have, like, if you want someone to be at your beck and call 24/7, who's a physician, who's like, you're going to pay for it. And maybe that's what you want. So go pay for it. Absolutely. That's awesome. Like, if you like, for sure do that, but you can't expect to pay near nothing and then expect the doctor to do everything. It's just, I mean, you wouldn't expect that of yourself either, right? Like value them the way you value your time in the same way. So
right, it's like having your clients call you 24/7, like, come on over, it's 3 in the morning, I need you to come give me that, and you're like, pay for that.
Exactly.
The other thing that we used to do when we first started out was we did place those Indeed ads, and I literally had like 100 physicians respond to the ad, and I had no way to sort, sift, and separate them. And it was so overwhelming. I was like, I can't do this. It's too much. And then, like you said, like, if your medical director doesn't work out for whatever reason, I actually had a student who started a med spa out in California, and within 2 years, she was billing like over $1 million. And the medical director saw that, and all of a sudden the medical director is like, well, I want to be paid like $100,000 a year now from like 20,000.
Right, yeah.
And, so it shut the whole business down temporarily because, what could she do without, she couldn't work without the medical director. Right. So, in this case, like, it's really, really, it's so much better to work with a service than, trying to figure out who these people are Indeed, and if they are the right fit at all, or just asking a colleague, which that can get awkward too, because if you work with that person and it doesn't work out, like, it's just weird.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say too, I mean, like, I'll be the first to admit there's downsides with working like a service too. Like, you don't get to be as picky about who you're working with. You don't get to be, you don't get to maybe define the terms as perfectly as you'd want to. But again, I think sometimes the right fit is better than the perfect fit, because like I said, the goal is to get your business off the ground and running and work with a team that can support you in that and get the medical director thing covered. The other benefit too is that, like, then your medical director has support, right? If he doesn't know that, or she doesn't know the question to answer, like, she's got someone to reach out to. Like, we keep pharmacists on staff because we found out, this happened to me. I was doing medical director work, and all of a sudden people are asking me about like how to mix IV bags. And I'll be like, I'm a doctor. I don't ever mix IV. It's like you don't want me to start the IV either. Trust me, it's just not a good idea. So again, we brought on pharmacists to be able to answer those more specific. That's one of the benefits, I think, too, is being able to have that true collaborative model together, and then even us being able to partner with you guys and be able to push. Hey, you know what? Like, you do need some business coaching. Come talk to Kimball. Like, that's what she's here for. Like, we really can come together. But again, we have to be all willing to work together and patient with one another and gracious with one another, which is hard, but working with people is messy, and That's why we do it. So
I have someone else asking if they start they're starting in IV hydration, but they're going to want to move into med spa services. Is this something they can add with your service?
Yeah, so we cover everything. So we do everything from, we have a specific IV hydration plan that we made more affordable, because obviously that's a niche that, like, you know, needs to be well served right now. But yeah, you at any time can upgrade to our elite package, which covers everything. So we do, and we work with franchises. We have some telemedicine partners that we work with. I mean, we do EMS oversight. I mean, we do really any kind of medical oversight you could imagine we have on there. But yeah, absolutely. The med spa stuff can be difficult though. And like I said, you know, depending on how you define a med spa and what area you're in. And, but yeah, absolutely. No, we do quite a bit of that, and actually have partnered with a couple of franchises in the medical director, in the med spa space as well. And going back to, I think, Jenna's question, like each franchisee does have their own medical director depending on what state they're in. But the benefit to the franchise is that they have one direct contact that we kind of standardize across our physicians and train them what protocols are appropriate, what they're not. They can ask us about legal stuff, you know, so they have those resources, which is beneficial.
That is awesome. If you guys have any last questions, we're getting ready to wrap up here. But so throw them in the chat box. And yeah.
One more thing, if I can, just throw in one more thing. Yeah. I think too, and I would encourage everyone, like I said, we run into this a lot, and I think it needs to be spoken to a little bit, is that having a medical director is not paying for a service. So I think a lot of people approach the medical director role like, I'm going to hire this director and he's going to provide a service and I'm going to pay as a service. And we really kind of have to shift our thinking on that, because we do have clients sometimes who will reach out and be like, hey, I haven't really been using your service. So, but it's like that, but it's not a service, right? Like it's almost like insurance, right? Like you can't run your business without the medical director. I, as a medical director, am really not there to talk to you every day. I can be available, right? But you, for the most part, are probably within your scope of practice. I'm there for when, you know, things hit the fan, right? Like I'm there for when compliance comes in and has questions. I'm there to sign up on the protocols. So a lot of times we see this kind of mentality of like, well, I'm not really utilizing this service. And it's not really a service, it's coverage, right? You're covered by a medical director, by that medical oversight. People don't realize that there's a lot that goes behind the scenes of drafting protocols and reviewing constantly the changing compliance and changing regulations and putting out recommendations. And just because you're not interacting with your medical director every day doesn't mean they're not bringing a lot of value to your business, because you couldn't run it without them. You know what I mean? Like, so again, I think some people try to, you know, chase that, you know, can I get it cheaper? Can I get it cheaper? Can I get it cheaper? And yeah, you can, you know what I mean? But again, you get what you pay for it. But just, I think changing our mentality about, again, this is not a pay as you go service. This really is, you're paying for a coverage, whether you're using it or not. It's like automobile insurance. You have to have it, but just because you didn't get in an accident doesn't mean you don't have to pay for it, right? I mean, just like it's there for when you need it, type of thing. So just something to keep in mind, because I think that mentality, physicians struggle a lot. Like we have a lot of physicians who come to us and say, hey, can I just be a medical director on your platform? I've got a couple clients of my own, but like they're treating me like I'm just this, like if I'm not doing anything, then they shouldn't have to pay me. But like they don't realize that like I put my license on the line for this. Like I've stepped up to say, hey, I'm here, and that's a big deal. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Somebody else is asking about kind of like your payment structure, what makes you stand out from your competitors. And I don't know if you want to answer that, or if you just want to have them go to the guardianmedicaldirection.com.
Yeah, I don't want to use this necessarily as a pitch type of thing. So you check out our website, set up a call with one of our account managers. We can explain all of that. Like I said, we have very competitive, you know, pricing, as well as a lot of extra benefits on the back end that we cover the physicians with insurance. Some things you need to look for also, I was going to say, if you do hire a medical director outside of a service or on your own, really, like I said, I would be hesitant to take their word when it comes to compliance and legal. Like we talked about, like your physician should have an attorney, right? If he's trying to tell you what the compliance and legal stuff is, you need to know who his or her attorney is behind the scenes. If they don't have one, then he's interpreting on his own. She's interpreting on her own. Again, we're not attorneys, so just be careful there. And then two, again, the due diligence on the license piece. Like I said, make sure that you're really looking at, you know, do they have that? And then insurance. Are they insured themselves for medical direction? Because just because they have insurance at the hospital they worked at doesn't mean anything for what they're doing outside of that work. So some of those due diligence pieces, like I said, we cover all that. Again, we have a pretty robust legal compliance team. some of these extra benefits. But yeah, absolutely. Schedule a call with us. Our account managers are awesome. Ryan and Joe, they'll get on a call with you and share with you all the details, and they're better at it than I am anyways.
Yeah. And that last thing you said is really important, because the hospital does not cover like the physician's insurance outside, like doing stuff outside of the hospital. And a lot of hospitals restrict physicians from doing, especially academic centers, that, they have to give 100% effort to what they're doing. So, they just have to be careful with that. So it's just, in my mind, it's so much better to go with a service for many, many reasons. And one last question here, and I'm not sure if this one's for Chris or Kimball, but do you have any recommendations for IT solutions for MDs signing orders, or is that a business decision?
I can answer that a little bit. So with Guardian Medical Direction, we have our own platform. So we do it all through our own platform, HIPAA compliant and that sort of thing. Other than that, I think it's probably up to you. I don't really have there's so many out there. There's lots of options, whatever you like, basically. So
yeah, there are lots of systems. You don't have to have an EMR, but there are some systems like IntakeQ, JotForm. I mean, there's lots of them that you can use that you can get HIPAA compliance with. You just have to do your research. Some are more expensive than others, so definitely do the research.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this was great, guys. Thank you so much, Dr. Seid. Thank you so much for coming on. And
thank you guys.
And Kimball, always good to see you. So
you too, Katie. All right. Thank you, Chris, for coming to talk to us.
Absolutely, no problem. Like I said, we're here if you need us. Like I said, I hope this was informational for those who tuned in. And again, like I said, keep asking questions. That's the best way to grow your business. And also, like I said, I'll just say as a quick, as a business owner myself, like, don't sacrifice good for perfect, right? Just go for it. You're going to do well. Pivot as you need to. That's just what business is. And like I said, it'll be good. If we're all, again, I always say, if we're all working together to do what's best for the patient, we can't go wrong. Like I said, that's what we do best. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.